So first of all, I want to get kind of a sense of the room. How many of you have ran any type of out-of-home campaign in the past? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so a few people. That's good because that's kind of the point of this, to explain to people who might not be that familiar with the space. How many of you have run like online ads or any type of digital ads in the past? Okay, so most people in the room, obviously. Now, I think it's kind of important to talk about what out of home was and what it is today, because it's an interesting topic. This is a very old industry, right? So it's been around for hundreds of years in the form of posters. But the digital side of it has grown a lot over the past, I would say 50 years especially. And it's traditionally a legacy business. So you have companies like Outfront, Lamar, Clear Channel, that own the billboards themselves, and have started digitalizing more and more of their inventory. Now, the problem with that is that it's usually really tough to get on those billboards unless you know someone or unless you're one of the big brands that wants to run ads there. So, and even when you manage to figure out how to get there, you're usually locked in long-term contracts, but that's a different conversation. You then don't really know what you're supposed to do on a billboard because it's a very different channel compared to traditional digital advertising, right? I always say that out of home is one of the few channels that is still one too many, right? Even TV now, with connected TV, you have more or less a few people in front of each screen. With mobile advertising, you have one person, one screen, 1 point something technically on average. Laptop, same thing. But with out of home, you're targeting a lot of people at the same time. So it doesn't really make sense to go by an impression multiplier. It makes sense to pick location. So that means that when you want to run an ad on a billboard, what you care about actually is where is this billboard based, right? If you want to run ads during South by, you're going to look for billboards next to the convention center. But you've been on both sides of the business, right? You've been on the media buying and planning, but you've also been on the creative production side of things now. So I'm curious how you've seen the industry kind of evolve over the past decade or more, and what your thoughts are on where it's headed, and then we can talk more about the tech that's happening in the space.
Yeah, so I've been in the out-of-home industry for about 15 years. So I started at an agency working with big brands, and then I transitioned to selling media, and then now working not now, but I've been there for 3 years producing the content that lives on the billboard. So, kind of going 15 years ago, there wasn't as much measurement. There's so much more measurement now. Out-of-home is still very much a brand awareness play. We were talking earlier, sometimes you buy a billboard, you don't really want to know or care to know how many impressions or delivery or really any of the metrics that you get with a lot of the digital formats. It's just you want to be on the specific billboard, you want to be on the Sphere in Vegas, you want to be in Times Square, and that's where you're going to be. It doesn't really matter how many people saw it. In fact, out of home, as you mentioned, is the oldest type of media. Even before posters, like back when people used to chisel ads on stones and stuff like that. So it's really evolved, and it's been around for a really long time. So there's so many different ways that we can layer on, AI, programmatic buys, dynamic content, targeted content, but it is a channel that delivers to the masses. So there might be a lot of waste, but you're also reaching a lot of people. So back when I first started, there was no measurement. It was really how many cars passed by this billboard. And now there's measurements in terms of eyes on. You can layer on with mobile data. You can know all of these different types of information that you didn't really know and you didn't really have back then.
I think one thing that I've talked to a lot of people at Lumos House over the past few days, and when I mentioned this, they all kind of get wide-eyed and like, okay, this is not possible, is the mobile attribution part of things, right? So one thing that you can do in out-of-home that you could not do before is you can actually track if people who are in front of the billboard either went to your website, did something on that website, or if you have a physical store, if they actually went to the store. Not only that, and this is an interesting mix where creative and planning come hand in hand, you can see which creative drove more traffic either to a website or more conversions or to the storefront. And the way you do that is basically you collect the mobile, or we collect the mobile advertiser IDs of people passing in front of the billboard at the exact second when the ad is running, which is another advantage because it's a digital billboard. So we get play logs. So we know the exact second when it was playing. And then we can say, okay, we collected 50,000 IDs of people who were in front of the billboard when your ad was playing. And then we compare that to another 50,000 IDs of people who were passing in the same area, but were never there when the ad was playing. So their chance of being exposed to the billboard is virtually zero. And because we have their mobile advertiser ID, we can see, and that's kind of scary. Fun fact, you can't do that in Europe. You can only do it in the US. And some people say, oh, really? So they are listening to us. Yes, they are listening to us. You can then basically see if those people went on the website. It's even cross-device because your phone connects to your home Wi-Fi. So even if you say, yeah, but I only visit websites from my laptop, doesn't matter. We still know. And that way you can basically see if your campaign was successful or not. You have to do a bit of a larger campaign in order to be able to get enough data to make it relevant. It's usually, we've noticed that the sweet spot for that type of analysis is around 50K for a campaign. So it's still prohibitive for some startups, but it's still better than it has ever been, right? Because in the past, the only way you could do this was basically a brand lift survey or a focus group or that type of stuff, which wasn't as accurate, and it's very different when you ask people what they feel about rather than kind of measuring their behavior. And the same thing, because we can see that behavior, you can see when a creative drove more traffic than another creative. Another interesting thing that we're doing in Europe with out of home with tech is that we work with some of the largest retailers in Europe as well, and we get their sales data from the point of sale. So we've ran campaigns for Pepsi, for example, and we know that when Pepsi ran an ad in the store, their sales will go up 10%. When they weren't running an ad, they were not going up. So it's kind of direct correlation with the sale in the actual store.
Yeah, I actually have an interesting case study. So when I worked with State Farm Insurance, we did a campaign where we geofenced a mall. And so whenever there were more than 50% of the people that were homeowners, the ad was for homeowners. And when it was over 50% for home renters, the ad was for home renters. And they definitely saw a conversion in just switching those two different creatives in real time based on the traffic in the mall.
Yeah, that's another cool thing, the whole dynamic creative optimization part. That's what it's called in the industry, where you can change the creative based on people who are in front of the billboard. Like you said, you can change it based on the weather. Like Austin has been having weird weather over the past few weeks. So you could have made fun of that or used it in your ad. You can sell umbrellas when it's raining and something else when it's sunny. All that type of stuff is doable now, even on out of home. And another thing that's kind of interesting for a lot of people, when we first started out the business in the US, we did it by running a very viral billboard. Some of you might have seen it. So this was back in 2021 when the GameStop thing was happening. So I was personally really into it. And I said, okay, it would be fun to run an ad on a billboard saying GME go brr, which was one of the memes that was going around, right? GameStop go brr. And we put that on a billboard. We took a video of it. We posted it on Reddit. And to this day, it's the most upvoted Reddit post of all time. So billboards go beyond just how many people see the billboard when they're passing in front of it. There's a lot of social amplification you can do with that type of content. And I know we were talking about this earlier about how the 3D visuals are so spectacular that the moment you post them on social, you can have a whole different amplification strategy on social in order to reach more people. So tell me a bit about that and how you guys approach that part.
Yeah, definitely. So you guys saw a lot of the campaigns that we've done. If any of you have been to Vegas and you've seen the Sphere and you try to see the content on it in person, it's pretty much impossible. It's like sitting in the front row of an IMAX theater. It's just way too big. So we know that whenever we produce for specific screens, they're going to be seen on a phone or on a computer. And so we design it to be seen that way. So an example is we ran a campaign for the launch of a new BMW vehicle, the XM, and that was on a billboard in Times Square. So we essentially did social posts on the BMW North America Instagram page for people to go to Times Square and be able to see the car revealed. A lot of people went. There was a QR code on the 3D ad for people to pre-order the cars. And these cars were $160,000. And they essentially sold out because people in Times Square were scanning it. Now, I don't know who's going to Times Square just on a whim, pre-ordering $160,000 cars, but BMW took the video of the campaign that we created, they put it on their TikTok, and in 24 hours, they got 18 million views. So that would have been very difficult to do just with people seeing the billboard, but by amplifying the video of the billboard, or the content on the billboard, they're able to get many, many more impressions by combining out of home and then social as well. And so it actually got tons of different exposure through PR channels and all these other things. So we know that whenever we create something that's 3D, we always get the question, we want this campaign to go viral, which if we knew the recipe for something to go viral, I'd probably be buying this house. But you know what I mean? Like there really is no secret recipe for something to go viral. It's just something that's relatable, that's created in a way that people can't look away. And I think that's the beauty with out of home. It's you can't really skip out of home. You can't really skip looking at a billboard, whereas you can with, you're talking about CTV. I'm sure everyone here, whenever you're watching something and there's an ad, the first thing you do is grab your phone while the ad's going, and then your show or your movie's back on, you put it down, right? With out of home, you can't really skip it. So unless you're not leaving your home, it's going to see you and you're going to see it, right? So there's a lot of different ways to amplify it. And then we've also seen that people are 55% more likely to pull out their phones and record a 3D campaign compared to a 2D campaign. So by investing, I'm going to say a little bit more, but it does cost, a decent amount to run a 3D ad. You're actually getting a lot more return through organic amplification. So people really resonate with that kind of content, and people like to be wowed. And then with that, all of the out-of-home ads that we do, the 3D ads, they're no longer than 30 seconds. Anything that's over 30 seconds is just way too long and people lose interest. So it's just a quick pop. It kind of catches your eye. You're like, oh my gosh, that car just came out at me. And that's the impact of the 3D campaigns that we work on.
Feel free to not answer this question. But I'm curious about the price point basically for 3D, because it's a question a lot of people have. Oh my God, that's amazing. How much is it, right? And I know it varies a lot from campaign to campaign, but I think people would be interested to know, like, at what budget point should you start? Like, how much should you be spending in order to even consider doing out of home? Like, what stage should you be at? What's kind of the entry level, at least, for a decent 3D out of home campaign, at least?
Yeah, so out of home is typically a more expensive medium, right? So compared to, we were talking about social posts, I mean, you can get a gazillion social posts for the price of one billboard. So it really depends on what your media mix is. In terms of 3D, that's a great question. There's a wide range of what you can do. So whenever people ask me, what does it cost? It's the same thing as asking me, how much does it cost to make a movie? So some of you might remember the Blair Witch Project. Are you making Blair Witch Project, or are you making an Avatar movie, right? One's going to be $10,000, one's going to be $1 billion. But the kind of the sweet spot that we fall into is around $100K to $300K for one 15-second ad. When we deliver that 15-second ad, you can run it all year. You can run it one time. You can run it for 4 weeks, which is a standard out-of-home buy. You can run it for a day if you wanted to, but then you can also create what we call adaptations. So for example, at BCN, we worked on the Avatar Way of Water campaign. We did a full takeover of 42 screens in Times Square where it looked like everything was underwater, and then created adaptations for screens in other countries where we localized the ad in the local language with the movie theater logo and all that kind of stuff. So you're able to reduce substantially your costs per screen when doing so. And then it's a lot more impactful when you have that type of global campaign. So it is a good investment, but you also get a really great return.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it becomes even more valuable if you have some sort of IP or some sort of thing that people know that you can show in that billboard. Like seeing Spider-Man in 3D is probably more spectacular than seeing a brand you don't know, or I don't know, something that's not maybe as popular. Should people take into account something like that? Like if they have a mascot or any type of thing that people already know, like turn that into 3D, or could they start off even if they don't have a very well-known brand?
Yeah, we can create 3D for any brand. So we recently worked with a brand that sells eye drops. And they came to us and they said, we sell eye drops. You know, it's one of the big pharma companies, but granted, it's eye drops. And they said, you know, our brand isn't super exciting and it's not going to explode and pop out of the billboard, but everything was done very on brand, and they actually saw sales lifts with the 3D campaign. So it doesn't necessarily have to be anything that people know, but of course, it's a lot more impactful. So one of the campaigns you might have seen on there was for Xbox, and it featured 4 different IPs. So that was a whole thing. They had influencers go up to one of the hotels and see it live and live stream it. So you're able to get more, a greater return when it's something recognizable. We did a campaign for Heineken on the Sphere for the Formula One in Vegas. That is one that people mention very often. So it does resonate, but it could be a brand that maybe is not as well known, but by doing 3D, they're going to be a lot more, recognized a lot more.
That makes sense. I'm curious, kind of, the panel topic is about AI and out of home, right? So now that we kind of established what the base out of home tech is right now, it's interesting to talk about how it will look like in the future, at least in my opinion. And I'll touch a bit later on how it looks from the media planning and buying side, because that's a whole different approach. But I'm curious how you see it from the creative generation part, right? It's easier than ever to create illustrations, animations, assets. I know people from BCN do their own personal projects, right, with Gen AI creative. So how do you see that making things, I don't know, either better or easier when it comes to 3D creative generation for billboards?
Yeah, so that's an interesting topic in the creative space, is using AI versus creating it from scratch. So a lot of the brands that we work with, when we sign paperwork with them, there is a clause that I've noticed that says, you're not using AI tools. This is created by a human. This is created by a team, which is actually very interesting. And how do you prove that? I don't really know, but we do pride ourselves on the quality of our designers and our artists. They're all award-winning artists and producers. So there's a lot of, obviously AI is very, very smart, but there's a lot of specific nuances that AI does not know how to do when it comes to 3D. And actually, we work with very renowned creative agencies, and they'll come to us and they say, we have these 10 briefs that we put together. We have these storyboards. They're going to be great. We want to do it like this. We want to do it, in 3D. And then we essentially tell them, well, that's not going to work because 3D is grounded in physics. And I'll explain this in a very simple way. So if you think of the Vegas sphere, everyone wanted to do a snow globe. So if you think about a snow globe, it's see-through. So if it's see-through, you need to see the hotel in the back. And if you see the hotel in the back, you need to see all of the windows. And if you see all of the windows, you need to stand in a very specific spot so that all of the windows are lined up. And then that means that if it's see-through, you need to have a creative at night for nighttime, and a daytime creative for daytime, and a foggy day creative for a foggy day. So you have to remember that 3D anamorphic is grounded in physics. And so the building itself, which is not a sphere, it's technically a dome, it's solid, right? It's not see-through at all. So there's very specific things that humans don't really know, and AI doesn't really have the know-how. And so that's when we're able to advise on what's going to work best. I'm sure everyone's familiar with One Times Square, where the New Year's Eve ball drops. It's a long, skinny building. We've had clients come to us and they say, we're an automotive brand. We want to feature our car. So how is the car going to drive up and down on a long, skinny screen, right? You really need to have a horizontal screen. So things like that, I think AI doesn't necessarily catch or have the understanding of how things work. Similar to media buys, right? You wouldn't buy media for taxi tops in LA because people don't really take taxis, and there really aren't taxis, but you would do it in New York. So there's specific things that we know as humans that AI might not know all of those little nuances.
I totally agree on the creative side, especially it probably helps you out in the initial planning stages if you want to do, I don't know, a mood board or something like that when you're just want to do it faster, but probably for the final creative 100%. It's interesting on the media planning and buying side. This is kind of the perfect example that you mentioned earlier, because you wouldn't buy taxi tops in LA. The issue is, and what AI is doing right now in terms of the media planning and buying side, is it's becoming better than ever because it manages to collect information from experts that have been doing thousands of campaigns, and it can look at the most successful campaigns and say, oh, no successful campaign has ever had taxi tops in LA. So that means that might not be a good idea. Will it cover 100% of cases? Obviously not. But we think, and that's how we see it, and that I want to cover a bit how the media planning and buying side looks like. It will probably solve 80 to 85% of cases, right? The rest might require a human touch, where it's something more subtle that the AI just doesn't get a context of. But the way things happen on our end now is you can essentially just upload the creative that you have for the brand. We have an AI that checks all the campaigns that we've run and all the public campaign data available on all the major publishers out there, anything from Adweek to others that publish campaign data. And it'll give you an initial media plan based on that. And it'll tell you, look, the example that we have is we ran a campaign for the Vegas Golden Knights, right? So all we did to test the product out, was we uploaded the creative. It was the season 8 opener. And the AI told me, I'm looking at the Vegas Golden Knights season 8 opener. Based on that, I am going to run a campaign in Las Vegas. I'm going to target the T-Mobile Arena because I know that's where they're playing. I checked information online and I saw the exact hour when the game is starting. So I'm going to pick hours, 2 or 3 hours before the game starts and 2 and 3 hours after the game finishes. And here's a $30K proposal for 1 day campaign if you want to get a blast during that thing. And then you can chat with it and say, oh, I don't want a 1 day campaign. I want a 1 week campaign, and change everything. In the past, you needed people who were out-of-home experts to do that. And most people have never run an out-of-home campaign. Like, it's a very niche industry. You have experts who are really good at it, but the majority of marketers haven't really touched out-of-home, simply because it was so specific. And they were like, yeah, on average, it's 5 to 10% of budget. So it didn't really make sense to pay that much attention with it. But now that it's automated, or it's becoming automated, it's still a work in progress, don't get me wrong. We feel that more and more brands will start doing more here because it will take less effort and less planning effort. And especially it'll be also opened up to more small and medium businesses. Like, if you're not doing 3D creative, you can run billboard ads. The GameStop example that I shared earlier was $20 an hour. And I remember you were at New Tradition at the time when we did that, and I know Vince hated us for it because we said that. But it'll become a standard. Sure, Times Square is a different beast. There are some minimums there, but you'll be able to run ads on a billboard in Austin, and you are able to do that now for a few bucks an hour on a highway. And if you do a impressive enough creative and then amplify that on social media, that might be enough if you're super early stage. If you're later stage, obviously you want to improvise and optimize a bit better when it comes to your campaign.
Yeah, I have an interesting thing. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen what you can call it, whatever you want to call it, but faux out of home. Yeah. So it's, the Maybelline mascara in the London tube, or the Truff sauce, hot sauce bottle coming out of the Sphere, or the purses that are kind of on a train track, right? And it's all fake. And people think that it's real. So I think, for us that are in out of home, I know immediately that you can't put eyelashes on a subway, right? Just in terms of the safety of the public and stuff like that. But people are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, Maybelline is amazing. They did such a great job. Like, I can't believe it. This wasn't even done by Maybelline. This was just someone on a computer kind of playing around. So a lot of brands will come to us and they'll say, why would I spend all this money with you when I could just get, my buddy over here, designer, to spend $1,000 and create something fake? Now, what we've found, and we are a little bit biased, is that when something is done in out of home and it's fake, people will actually go to that specific location to see the activation, and it's not there. So it's actually a pretty big backlash on the brand when people feel like they've been lied to. So with a lot of this, Maybelline, the Barbie doll in Dubai, walking out of the box, I mean, we had some very, very, very seasoned clients asking us like how to do that. It's like, this is obviously very fake, right? So there's been a lot of, technology, AI, a lot of these things used in a specific way that might not necessarily work with your brand. And there really is a lot of focus on authenticity and making things that are genuine and that resonate with people these days, especially in advertising. So when you do try to cut corners with this fake out of home, I think, audiences notice, and they might not notice it in a positive way.
And I also think, so fake out of home had a benefit in the beginning because it was novel. So it's exciting for the first, 5 brands that do it until people kind of catch on. But after a while, I've noticed and I noticed the engagement on social or on all the fake out of home. There's some happening now as well. And you can tell people are not that excited anymore. They were in the beginning, but they were like, oh, it's fake, never mind, right? It's the same with any type of innovation like this that's kind of cool for a minute and then it blows off because you kind of get the idea. Thank you, everyone. And feel free to hang out after.
Thank you.